Okay, I've been asked to talk about other mass gatherings, and you'll be surprised as to how many large ones there are currently existing. Now, we all know that the Hajj is the best documented one in the medical literature, and because there's centuries of detail, whether it's medical or just spiritual ones of it. But there's been a couple of recent ones that have been happening over the last century or two, and I'm going to talk basically about three of them. And unlike the Hajj, none of them are compulsory. People go for 3 to 5 days for these particular mass gatherings, unlike the Hajj, again, where people go for a couple of weeks at a time. Now, normally when we talk of travel, people are always concerned about death during travel. And the commonest cause of death during travel happens to be cardiac in those over the age of 55. And non-natural forms of death, such as motor vehicle accidents, takes, sorry, you can just carry on. Another one? Yeah. I should have done that, sorry. But why I'm mentioning the number of motor vehicle accidents is that those are important components of the three mass gatherings that I'm going to be speaking about. And though only 2% of deaths during travel happens to be due to infections, these can often be prevented. This is the first mass gathering I'm going to be talking about, and these are pilgrims arriving in Bangladesh. And this is, next one, close to Tongi on the outskirts of Dhaka. And this is the Bishwa Ijtima. And this movement started in the 1950s by the Muslim Bengali Tablighi Jamaat. And the first one was organized in Chittagong in 1954. And then the subsequent year, it was in another venues. And then there were movements and mass gatherings in the 1960s held in Dhaka. But as the numbers grew, the movement moved to close to the Turak River. And then finally in the 1960s, 1970s, the government of Bangladesh then allocated a large area of land for this particular large mass gathering. Right. So as I've mentioned, it's on the outskirts of Dhaka, and it is held over 3 days in 2 phases in consecutive weeks to accommodate the large crowds. And it mostly consists of prayers, lectures, and discussions. And the apex is the Akhiri Munajat, when people actually stand en masse and pray and supplicate to God. Now, Bangladeshis make up the majority of attendees at this particular function. But because it's such a large country, and remember Bangladesh is divided into 64 districts, every Bangladeshi can go only 2 years, every second year rather. So how they organize it is that Bangladesh is divided into 64 districts. So this particular year, 32 of the 32 districts can go, 16 for the first week and 16 for the next week. Next year, the other 32 districts will go. Again, 16 of one district and 16 districts of the other ones. And only about 50,000 foreigners attend this. And this is where it's held. It's under large makeshift, not makeshift, it's actually permanent tents, but it's open-aired and open-ended. And the issues, as far as travel is concerned, is that motor vehicle accident, again, as I've mentioned before. Now, even though there's 1,800 traffic officials stationed all over there, trauma is still a major problem, and there's 7,000 police deployed there. Of the vaccine preventable diseases, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A, and hepatitis B are often encountered. And of the non-vaccine preventable ones, Zika, dengue, and chikungunya are of concerns. However, there's no real documentation of the incidents. And every year, 26 fog machines are used to spray insecticides. There's 45 medical centers providing free medical care, 14 ambulances on standby, and there are tertiary hospitals close by looking after the sick pilgrims. So what do we know? Firstly, there's a high number of older people, and we also, as I've indicated, know that they live in open-ended tents. We do not know the number of chronic diseases these older people suffer from, and even though there's good surveillance, the exact number of pilgrims attending it The exact number of illnesses encountered are not known. There's no real records of the illnesses and accidents that are encountered. There's also the issue of informal food control in that the people cook in large outdoor pots, so travelers' diarrhea is clearly a high risk. What we do know, however, is that the tertiary hospital that these patients get referred to does not see an increase in outpatient admissions, outpatient consultations, or inpatient admissions during the Bishwa Ijtima. Okay, so the questions I want to ask is, what draws the pilgrims, and what are the benefits for these pilgrims? Now we're moving to South Africa, my country, and we're moving now to Moria, which is the home of the Zion Christian Church. This is what Moria looks like over Easter period, which is normally March or April in South Africa. And in 2012, it is considered that there were 9.5 million people who attended this Easter gathering in Moria. Okay, let's sign. Okay, now the Zion Christian Church is the biggest church in Southern Africa with 16 to 20 million members. They're mostly South African. It was founded by Pastor Lekanyana in 1910. And this particular church combines Christianity with some elements of traditional African beliefs, such as the powers of ancestors being recognized. The church has two factions. The one wears the emblem of a star at all time, and the other wears the emblem of a dove. And there's certain things that are important to them, and that is, for example, makuku, which is feet stomping, and choir participation and singing is quite important for them. And of interest is that this church practices forbids the consumption of alcohol, smoking and eating of pork, and denounces sexual promiscuity and violence. Good. Okay. So the highlight, as I've mentioned, of this religious calendar for them is the Easter Mass gathering, and it is held outside Polokwane, which is in the north of South Africa. The church this year claims that there were 10 million who attended over a period of 3 days, but the traffic officials of the town, which actually regulates it, puts it at about 5 million attendees. What is documented is that there were 80,000 buses that were parked over there, and people live in makeshift tents. There's good ablution facilities, there's food stalls that sells food to the attendees, and many of the attendees actually sleep in the buses there as well. And currently, we consider it to be probably the largest annual mass gathering on earth. And of interest is that 95% of the attendees are South Africans, with about 60% males. Most are relatively young, with an average age of 30. They're well educated, with about half of them having a diploma at least. And even though most of them came for religious reasons, others came for business and so forth. Of note is that 98% were repeat visitors. What we don't know enough of is and why I mentioned that is a mosquito, we call it traveling mosquitoes. If we look at the map which draws the attendees, you can see the red areas that's where Moria is, but those are countries that actually has currently malaria. So we don't really know how many cases of malaria there are, for example. What we do know is that it has a clinic, it is manned by nurses and doctors. We know that motor vehicle accidents are a major issue. There's no information available about patients and diseases encountered. We know that Zimbabwe recently had a cholera epidemic. 2% of the attendees are from Zimbabwe, and there's closed and cramped facilities. Okay, so again, I want to repeat the same questions. What draws the pilgrims? This is nearly 50% of the church, nearly 20% of the South African population. What draws them back? I already said 98% of them are repeat visitors. And what are the benefits for them? Now we're going to the west of Africa, to Senegal.
Just 1 minute left.
Sorry?
1 minute.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Grand Magal, which is in the west of Africa. 18th of Safar, which is the second month of the Islamic calendar. This was the 28th of October this year, and it is estimated that there were 4 to 5 million people there during this particular year. Right, and we know that there's evidence of spread of cholera during 2004 and 2005. There was a nice study done in 2015 which documented 32,000 consultations, and it showed that most of the cases were trauma, fatigue, heat strokes, and febrile systemic illnesses. So again, the questions that we have to ask there is, what draws the pilgrims and what are the benefits there as well? And I want to end off with religious tourism. We have to keep in mind, religious tourism is big business. In India, 70% of domestic travel is for religious purposes. In the United States, a quarter of USA travelers are interested in it. And The Economist in 2002 put out a nice flyer stating Meconomics, or profit from the prophet. And we know in Saudi Arabia, for example, it is the second largest source of income for after oil. Last year, the South African, he was then the deputy president, went to Moria because clearly he could speak to at least 10% of the South African potential voters during that time. And this year, the president of Senegal, Macky Sall, stopped by on the Thursday before the Grand Magal and asked the Murid leader to pray for his re-election. So clearly there's political, there's economic, and there's religious benefits into all of these grand religious gatherings. Thank you.